It is my great privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, who I believe will be joining us on screen from Washington. I'm introducing Mark Lambert, China Coordinator and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for China and Taiwan of the U.S. State Department. Mr. Lambert has extensive experience in China, cross-strait, and Asia-Pacific affairs. He most recently served as Deputy Assistant Secretary with responsibility for Japan, Korea, Mongolia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. While political counselor in Hanoi, he helped devise a South China Sea maritime strategy. He served twice in Beijing, most recently managing U.S. political military affairs with China. He's a recipient of numerous awards for his work in addressing crises in Asia, such as the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. We're so pleased to have you with us today. Deputy Assistant Secretary Lambert, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your patience. Well, that was exciting. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm speaking to you today from the State Department in Washington. I'm terribly sorry that I cannot be with you all there in person, but I'm glad to have this opportunity to join you virtually. Thank you to Signal and to you, Carice, for inviting me to speak with you all here today. Before I get into my remarks, let me start by saying that Hamas's shocking attack on October 7th was devastating, and I know that the Israeli people are still living with the consequences of that horrible day. Israel faced its darkest moments on October 7th, and throughout, the United States has stood with Israel. President Biden has reaffirmed time and time again my country's ironclad commitment to the security of your country. The United States is also doing everything we can to end the terrible suffering of the people in Gaza, to bring home all of the hostages, and to prevent the conflict from spreading. I know this is not the topic of today's discussion, but it's important for me to acknowledge that context. Turning back to today's conference, I'd like to congratulate Signal on its Global Israel Initiative, which, as Carice mentioned, was launched earlier this year. I commend your goal of broadening and deepening Israel's ties across the Indo-Pacific. This is a goal that we share with you. The PRC presents the most significant long-term challenge to the international order because it is the only competitor with both the intent to reshape the international order and increasingly the economic, the diplomatic, the military, and the technological power to do it. The United States has continued to deliver on our invest, align, and compete approach to U.S. PRC relations. In our invest pillar, we've made historic investments in the sources of American strength at home, including through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Align means cooperating with our partners, as was mentioned before, that lattice work of relations that we have that include trilateral cooperation with Japan and Korea, the Quad with India, Japan, and Australia, AUKUS with the UK and Australia, trilaterals with Japan, the Philippines, and the United States, and increasingly a greater connection between Europe and our friends in East Asia. But this also means we want to coordinate more closely with our partners in Israel to advance our goals of preserving the rules-based international order from which we all, including the PRC, have benefited. President Biden has placed tremendous focus on deepening our alliances and our partnerships around the world, especially in the Indo-Pacific. But we are also competing, and intense competition requires intense diplomacy. We are committed to responsibly managing this incredibly important relationship and ensuring that competition does not inadvertently veer into conflict. In that spirit, we are seeking to maintain open lines of communication with Beijing, even as we continue taking competitive steps to defend our interests and our values, always in close coordination with our allies and our partners. While there are many areas where the United States and the PRC disagree, there is no substitute for face-to-face diplomacy in maintaining those channels of communication and responsibly managing our competition. As you all know, Secretary Blinken concluded a 3-day visit to Shanghai and Beijing, April 24th to 26th, to follow up on the agenda set by President Biden and President Xi Jinping in San Francisco last November. Our three objectives for that trip were, number one, to responsibly manage our competition and to strengthen our lines of communication. Second, to make progress on areas of cooperation. And third, to manage our bilateral, regional, and global differences. We saw progress in three areas where our leaders made commitments in San Francisco. First, in advancing counter-narcotics cooperation to disrupt the global flow of synthetic drugs into the United States. Second, to enhance military-to-military communication to avoid miscalculation and conflict. And third, we launched talks on managing the artificial intelligence risk and safety challenges. The Secretary and his Chinese interlocutors also discussed Russia's war against Ukraine. China is by far the largest supplier of dual-use goods to Russia. It now accounts for more than 73% of Russian imports since the invasion. Secretary Blinken underscored the importance of this issue to not only Ukraine, but to transatlantic security. Transatlantic security, of course, is a core U.S. interest. Secretary Blinken told the Chinese that Beijing cannot claim to be a neutral actor in this conflict while it is supporting the greatest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. He made clear that if China supports Russia's defense industrial base does not stop, the United States will take action. Secondly, we had deep conversations about our economic differences. China remains America's third largest trading partner. We did over $700 billion worth of trade with China last year. Yet we have concerns in three basic areas on economic cooperation. First is China's overcapacity. You've seen steps we've taken to express our deep concern about China's overcapacity in electric vehicles, in electric vehicle batteries, and some renewable technologies. Second is what National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has described as our deep concerns about certain technologies. The so-called small garden high fence problems. We have deep concerns about certain technologies that can be weaponized. And in short, we're not going to aid the Chinese in getting technologies that can be weaponized to kill Americans or our friends and allies. And third, we have deep concerns about human rights steps. You've seen we've taken steps to ban the importation of goods into the United States that are made in Xinjiang without a full guarantee that those goods are not made with forced labor. The PRC represents a global challenge, but nowhere is that challenge more acute than in the Indo-Pacific. In the Pacific, we see the challenge Beijing poses manifest through Chinese law enforcement and security presence in several countries. China's blatant bribery to flip Taiwan's diplomatic partners, and heavily branded, non-transparent, and debt-laden infrastructure projects. Although China presents a national security challenge which will set the stage for the future, our vision for the region transcends geopolitics. Our Indo-Pacific strategy envisions an Indo-Pacific that is free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. Our strategy recognizes that today's challenges, such as climate change and economic resilience, are too big for any single country to tackle on its own. And to further connect the Indo-Pacific to the rest of the world, the United States is committed to working together with our Indo-Pacific and our European partners to establish the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. The IMEC is expected to stimulate economic development through enhanced connectivity and economic integration between Asia, the Arabian Gulf, and Europe. Israel is central, literally and figuratively, to this bold vision. We are continuing to strengthen our support for the regional priorities aligned with the Pacific Islands Forum 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. We are expanding our diplomatic presence and development assistance in that region with new embassies, an increased U.S. Agency for International Development presence, and the return of the Peace Corps volunteers to a number of countries in the Pacific. The recent passage of over $7 billion in funding for our Pacific Islands partners demonstrates our commitment to close partners in the region. Because the threats to the international system Beijing poses are not confined to the Indo-Pacific or to any other single region, it is imperative that we knit together our partnerships and our coalitions across issues and across continents to strengthen our collective engagement with those who share our vision. This includes emerging partners across the globe who are invested in partnering with us on an issue-by-issue basis in defense of these principles, who recognize the need to deepen, to broaden, and connect our partnerships across the world, establishing and supporting both new and existing networks to build collective capacity and to address global challenges. That is how we will continue to address global challenges to the international order in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and I wish you continued success in your endeavors. Thank you.
I would like to thank Deputy Assistant Secretary Lambert